Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this author interaction of the 2024 NLF Reading Challenge. My name is Samantha, and I hope you're as excited to be here as I am. The NLF Reading Challenge is a 3-month-long reading event from July to September 2024 for students between grades 4 to 6. It runs on the competitive as well as the non-competitive tracks. For the challenge, students read their way through a curated set of 30 books. They discuss their reading with their friends and their guide, log their thoughts, and get to interact with the authors of some of these books online. The challenge will conclude with a quiz competition that will see the 3 best teams win gold, silver, and bronze engraved trophies, certificates of achievement, and a wonderful set of books. For today's event, please use the Q&A box to type out your questions or your responses to what's being discussed during the session. If you're from a school, please mention the name of your school along with your question as well. Today, we're honored to have with us the award-winning author Lynne Rae Perkins, known for her gentle voice filled with love and humor. Lynne was awarded the Newbery Medal in 2006 for her young adult novel Crisscross. She is the author of several other novels such as All Alone in the Universe, As Easy as Falling Off the Face of the Earth, Nuts to You, and Secret Sisters of the Salty Sea. Lynne has also written and illustrated several acclaimed picture books, including Frank and Lucky Get Schooled, The Broken Cat, Snow Music, Pictures from a Vacation, and The Cardboard Piano, among others. The author lives with her family in northern Michigan. Lynne Rae Perkins joins us today to speak about her book, Violet and Jobie in the Wild, which is on the reading list of the challenge. Welcome, Lynne. We're thrilled to have you with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's lovely to be here.
Thanks so much for joining us today, Lynne. Would you like to begin the session with a short reading from the book?
Sure. I chose chapter 5 from Violet and Jobie in the Wild, and I chose it partly because it's the right length, but also because I think it shows Violet's, as you know, these 2 mice who lived in a cozy house were captured and dumped out on the side of the road, and they have to find their way in a world they don't know how to navigate. And so this is, I think, the first glimpse that where we hear that we find that Violet is probably going to be okay. She realizes she might be able to adapt to this world. She's not sure yet, but it's a little glimmer of hope. So the chapter is called A Hole in a Tree Trunk. Fortified by the raspberries, brother and sister journeyed on. Daylight was fading, the air cooling. What exactly is it that we're looking for again? Asked Violet. A hole, said Jobie, in a tree trunk. I think that's how it's done. Okay, said Violet. At least they were among trees now. That was a start. So far, though, the trees seemed to be unperforated, without holes. Are we supposed to make the hole ourselves? Violet asked. How would we do that? I think they're usually already there, said Jobie. We just have to find one. By and by, as Violet scanned their surroundings, her eyes fell on what seemed to be a large round opening with a ragged edge, partly hidden by plants of some kind. She pushed them aside and peered into it, then called to Jobie. Is this what you mean? She said. It's a hole in a tree trunk. I was picturing an up and down tree, said Jobie, but this might do for now. They crawled inside the hollow log. It smelled like wood, which was nice. There was also another, less pleasant odor, one they didn't know. Maybe that's just how wood smells in the wild, said Jobie. In the remaining light, they gathered up grasses and twigs and ancient dried leaves and piled everything into a heap inside the log, far enough back to feel safe. They crawled into the center of the heap and nestled together. What a day it had been. So much had happened. Their weary minds swirled with new sensations. Their muscles ached from new exertions, but they were still alive, and they were still together. How are you doing, Vi? Asked Jobie. Okay? Yeah, I'm okay, she said. You? I'm okay, said Jobie, kind of tired. No kidding, said Violet. But also, Her voice trailed off. Jobie waited, then he said, "But also what?" "Plucky," murmured Violet. "I feel plucky." Sometime in the night, the unfamiliar odor grew stronger and nearer. Its pointed nose hovered over the freshly assembled heap of vegetation. It sniffed curiously, but it wasn't especially hungry. It drifted back to the far end of the hollow log. The unsuspecting mice slept on. So that's the end of that chapter. And the reason I chose it, besides Violet feeling plucky, is that the mysterious creature who comes and sees that they're sleeping hints at all the dangers that they are going to face.
Thanks so much for that lovely reading, Lynn. I had a smile all throughout the reading on my face. And we're so glad that you picked out that lovely passage because it connects with our first question. So we'll start off the Q&A segment with two interconnected questions. So Violet and Jobie in the Wild is a book centering new experiences. Through the characters Violet and Jobie, you beautifully capture the wonder of seeing things for the first time. And through Zolian, you show the reader that there are different ways of seeing the world. I also read that you moved to rural Michigan years ago after having lived in a city for a long time. And you've spoken about how the living situation was sort of rustic and that you started noticing a lot of different things after the move. Were you able to draw from this experience and your home while you wrote about Violet and Jobie's journey? And this also connects to a question from a grade 4 student, Ayushri from Shambhudayal Global School from Ghaziabad, who asks, how did you approach writing the transition from the familiar to the unknown? And what do you hope readers will take away from Violet and Jobie's adaptation to their new environment?
So I have to say that I found all of these questions really interesting and thoughtful, and I could probably, write pages about each one. But so in terms of that question, I think it's interesting because I'm sure I drew on that experience, although that wasn't maybe consciously what I was thinking about while I was writing it. But I did move. I moved with my husband. We moved into a very rustic situation. We moved into a little cabin on a hillside. And so we had a shelter, but we had no utilities. We didn't have electricity. We didn't have running water. And so that was a big change for me. And it was only temporary because we were planning to build our house there. But I learned that I could build a fire in a wood stove. I learned that I could haul water. And while if I had to rely on my foraging skills to live, I would starve to death. I did learn about wild strawberries and wild raspberries and certain kinds of mushrooms. But another thing that was part of that move was that I had gone from, I grew up in the suburbs, and when I lived in Boston and in Milwaukee, I had jobs. I worked for people and I got a paycheck. And when we moved to our little cabin, we were self-employed and we did various things to have enough money. But the great thing about it was, so that was a big adjustment for me, learning to be self-employed. But a big benefit of it was that our expenses were really low. So I had time to do things like sit on the couch and look out the window by the wood stove and watch the snow falling down. And I think for me, that was one of the greatest gifts of this change. Knowing that I could do it and having time to think about things. And I think that really what I consciously wanted kids or readers to take away from this was that you can experience change and you can not only survive, but you can thrive.
Thanks so much for that response, Lynn. I'm sure Aishi's taking notes. So, Lynn, Violet's favorite show on TV is Nature Magnificent, and her experience of the world outside her human home is virtual. There is a parallel there with the lives of many people today, both young and older, whose experience of the outdoors is becoming increasingly virtual. And we know that you started writing the story after hearing about the mice in your friend's home who were dropped off at a park after having lived a cushy life in a human house. But when did this metaphor or parallel, if you will, find its way into the book? Was it a conscious choice or something that happened organically?
I think it really happened organically. And I'm sure it was part of my thought process, but one of my favorite things about making up stories is I don't know how it works for other authors necessarily, but for me, I start out with characters and I learn about them as I write about them. And at first, I don't really know completely who they are. I have an idea, but they become more and more themselves as I write. And one of my very favorite parts about writing is when they say something that surprises me. So, so when I was mostly thinking about how you would explain TV to somebody who had never heard of TV, and I was just really happy when Zolian responded with his thing about, well, I'm pretty busy learning about what's around me right now, and I mean I think they're both good things, but yeah, I do think I have a little plaque in my house that says "Go into real life," which means get off your phone.
Oh, lovely. Great. We now have a question about your creative process, Lynn. We know that you made elaborate dioramas when you wrote your picture book, Museum of Everything. And for our young readers who are not familiar with dioramas, they are miniature representations in which sculpted figures and lifelike details are displayed. And for Crisscross Lake, your Newbery Medal winning novel, you made a model of the civic arena in Pittsburgh. Did Violet and Jobie's story bring about any similar creations? You have also said that you have had more fun making the drawings in Violet and Jobie than you did when you made an entire book of drawings. What made this process more enjoyable? Are there drawings in the book that you particularly enjoyed making?
Okay, another interesting question. So when I went to college, I was an art major, and I came to writing late. I mean, I always was a reader, and I always wrote in a journal, but I didn't start writing stories till I was in my mid 30s. And sometimes I just find making things or drawing things um, something that's more native to me, more natural to me. And sometimes I just find that doing things with my hands, while I'm doing them, my mind is figuring out the story part or figuring out, little lines of dialogue will pop into my head. But and so for this book, I didn't make any, I'll talk about that in just a minute. I didn't make anything till recently. But so the basic the basic mouse body structure is their head is a circle with a triangle, two more circles, and a rectangle, and then two little flat feet and these little hands. So it's a really basic form, and I had a really good time making it be expressive. I put the mice in positions that I'm sure mice never assume, but it was really fun trying to make it look like it was something that a mouse would do.
Yeah.
And then also I also just kind of um, found I hit my stride in a certain way in making these little illustrations with watercolor, and they're all watercolor and watercolor brushes on watercolor paper. And I just found my way somehow into, I liked building up layers of marks to make a really rich, dark, and some of them are just really silly. Like the one, I don't know if you remember, there's a picture of where Violet learns to dig a tunnel. And so it's just a
Yeah,
little silhouette with these
yeah,
two little mouse
yeah,
figures on
yeah.
top. And they were just really fun to draw. And, they helped me create the world that the mice lived in. But I found it's kind of an interesting question, partly because I'm getting ready to do a school visit with a school that's reading Violet and Jobie. And I find that when I'm going to talk to people about it, I'm more comfortable if I have props. So I made these two little mice, the Violet and
Oh,
Jobie, out of clay.
oh, so
And,
cute.
and I made this, I don't know if I can show this. I made this background for the mice. So because I wanted to talk about how what it's like moving to a new place. And I wanted to bring home the reality of these two little mice in these big jungle and what that would be like. So I find, I don't know, I think I find making things really satisfying, but also really helpful to my mind and explaining things.
Lovely. And then we have an audience question for you that's also related to your creative process. This is from Hayden, a grade 4 student from St. Stanislaus International School in Mumbai, who asks, what kind of technological assistance, if any, do you use to aid your drawing and creative process, Lynne?
Okay. So I'm mostly pretty old school. I write in I wonder if I have one here. I write in a notebook like this, which is actually a drawing pad so that I can draw too with a gel. I like gel pens because they flow. And normally when I'm writing, I will write several pages and then I will type it into my laptop because it does have to be typed eventually. And then as I'm typing it, I sort of revise as I go and print it out and look at it again. But so I'm mostly old school in that way, although I have started really enjoying making little movies on my iPhone or on my laptop with iMovie. It's just user friendly enough that I can pull it off.
Oh. That's nice. That must be very interesting for you.
It is. It's fun.
So, Lynne, Violet and Jobie's life is changing constantly and continuously when they're released into the wild. So they grow from being mice who refuse to run in two directions, even when a fox is about to gobble them up, to mice who live entirely separate lives with their own adventures and families. And change is melancholic, and the concluding lines from the book, if I may quote them, showcase this. And on they traveled, kindred spirits, exploring the world as it was offered to them, dining well, watching the fires, making new friends. And sometimes they were sad, because who isn't when you think of loved ones who are lost to us? The ending, Lynne, is bittersweet. Were there other happier endings that you considered while writing the book? And have you heard from your young readers about what they felt about the ending?
So there are a couple lines right after that say, but mostly they were happy, really happy, even ever after. And so I think that all of us face change in our lives and all of us lose people. And I think that it's important to know that, sure, it's good to be sad when we lose people. And there are many ways to lose people. We can lose people through death or through moving or just through changing relationships. But I think it's really important to know, as I said earlier, that we can not only survive, but thrive, and we can be happy without forgetting about those people, but we can be happy again. And in terms of kids' reactions, there was a librarian in Massachusetts who did a book group with this book, and she reported to me that the group was evenly divided. Half of them thought it was a happy ending, and half of them thought it was a sad ending. So I thought that was really interesting. But to me, I mean, I could see the sadness, and it is bittersweet, but I could also think that it was okay.
True, it's true. Yeah, there's a lot of promise. The book closes with a lot of promise.
Yeah, this particular book group thought that I should write another book that has their separate lives and then they come together at the end. Which I don't know if that will happen. But.
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of our young readers feel the same way. Now, Lynne, I have a sort of related question about that. And I heard you speak in an interview about how books with animal protagonists help children read from a safe space and understand emotions and similarities in a non-threatening way, because animals are like us, but also not like us. Does it allow you to write from a safe place too? Having written stories featuring human and animal protagonists, do you find that it's easier for you to write, say, bittersweet endings when a character is slightly separated from the reader through a species barrier?
I think I probably do find it a safe place to write from. I think that's a really interesting idea. When I'm writing about them, I mean, for example, I think it would be really difficult to write a story about people being dumped out on the side of the road. That would be really harsh.
Yeah.
But it seems like not quite as harsh with animals. But when I'm writing about it, I mean, I always am aware that they're supposed to be animals, and I think about things like what they would eat or whatever. But the emotional life of my characters is always human. It's they're always human feelings that I'm writing about. But I think it's interesting because I think you can also, there are a lot of different ways that writers do that. And, another way is if you write about something that happened in a different time or a different place, it's just easier to look at it from a little distance, I think.
Yeah, that does make sense. Now let's shift gears slightly with a question from Johan, Shivansh, and Vedant, three grade 5 students from the Sri Ram School in New Delhi, on a particularly joyous aspect of the book. They want to know the mouse siblings engage in creative and adventurous activities such as foraging in disguise, surfing a rain spout, and hitching rides on animals. How did you come up with these imaginative activities, and what inspired you to include them in the story to reflect the mice's adaptation to the wild?
Another really interesting question. So there's a part in the book where Violet gets the idea of riding on the rabbit's back because it's the same shape as the Galapagos turtle shell. And in the book, it says, our mind, and I really believe this is true, our minds are always working. They're always trying to solve the problems of our lives, even when we don't know it, even when we think we're just eating lunch or something. And every now and then, our minds take two little pieces of things that we're thinking of and put them together, and we call that getting an idea. And it happens, like, everybody has ideas all the time. You just have ideas about whatever it is that you're involved with. Like, if you're looking for what to eat for lunch, you open the refrigerator and you see what's in there, and your mind thinks, I have some of this and some of that, I'll put them together. And so part of my process, my writing process, is I work in my studio every morning, and every day I go for a walk, and there's a woods near our house, and often with our dog. And during that time, I'm not maybe consciously thinking about whatever I'm working on, but a lot of times little ideas will pop into my head. And I think it's just that. I think it's a combination of whatever I'm working on, and then maybe I see something around me, like maybe I see a leaf, and I think, oh, they could hold it over their head. So I think it's kind of mysterious, but it's actually one of my favorite parts of my job is having these little ideas pop into my head. And it's something we all do and something we can all learn to nurture.
I'm so glad about the response because it connects to our next question. You write very vividly about the natural world, Lynn. In a video in your website, you tell young writers that inspiration for stories can be found around them through magical things in nature, such as a footprint made out of stone, or goggles made out of tree roots. In that video, as in many of your books, it seems like nature has been a constant stem of inspiration for you. Are there any writers, specifically nature writers, whose books you greatly enjoy, who may have helped you pick up and hone your craft and voice?
So I do live very close to a very large lake, Lake Michigan, and I do live about 3 minutes walk from a woods where I go walking most days. And out my studio, I have a big window and it looks out onto trees, and there are little animals and everything there. So, like, I'm surrounded by nature, and it's just part of my life, and it's a very rich vocabulary of things that go on there, plants and animals and skies and weather. And but I think that I'm usually writing about interactions between people, or people stand-ins.
Yeah.
and the nature is kind of my setting, and it's my props. But I think the writing is mostly about animals. I mean, I was trying to think of an example, and I guess one example might be something like Frog and Toad, the Arnold Lobel books, which, I mean, they're frogs, but they're not really frogs. But they're in nature, and they have hills and rocks and things like that. Although my animals are a little wilder because they don't have houses with beds and stoves and things.
So Lynn, Violet and Jobie in the Wild does not paint a romantic picture of nature. All animals in the story, owls, herons, foxes, and even mice, need to eat. It's not portrayed as an act of cruelty or villainy. It is presented plainly and candidly, sometimes even looked at with wonder, such as in these lines. When the heron came back up, a frog's legs wiggled wildly between its upper and lower beak. A couple of quick beak adjustments, and the frog disappeared completely inside the heron. Was this a conscious choice to show that nature is beautiful but also sobering? How do you balance these twin aspects of nature in your writing? And do you think about how children would receive this?
So the main thought I had after considering this question was that there are a lot of picture books that kids are read, and that show animals, like animals that would normally eat each other, being best friends, or bears being big cuddly animals. And I think, even though I have dear friends who make picture books about big cuddly bears, I think that there's a little bit of a danger in that, and not recognizing that they're wild animals, and they don't necessarily want to be our best friend. And I just think, I think nature is a wonderful thing. Animals are amazing. I love learning about them. I love looking at them. But they're animals, and I think it's important to recognize what that really means. And I don't think it has, I don't think it has to be. There's a famous line from a poem, nature red in tooth and claw, which is like a lot more violent than I want to go, but I think it's just important to recognize how animals live.
Right. Yeah, that's fair. So, Lynn, we're about 2 minutes from the close of the session. This half an hour has whisked by. So I will leave you with one last audience question. You've already sort of answered this, but a lot of kids who are asking this, so I will ask you this. Is there going to be a part 2 where Violet finally finds her brother?
I don't know. It's not what I'm working on right now. But I guess it's not out of the realm of possibility. I will say that after you've written about mice or squirrels for a year or a year and a half, you're sort of ready to write about something else. So I guess it could happen, but I don't know.
That brings us to the end of the session. Thank you very much for speaking with us today, Lynn. It's been an absolute pleasure, and we wish you all the very best with your upcoming work.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's been really fun.
Thank you, Lynn. Bye.
Bye-bye.